if all the effort, if all the effort that has gone into this, certainly sincere, heartfelt, sincere campaign, if all that effort were channeled somewhere else in facilitating, direct farm to plate marketing, facilitating, abattoirs so farmers could get, to get slots for their animals to be able to get them processed, or whatever. The point is that there are other competitive options for placing this level of time and attention in the food system. And I always come away from this thinking, boy, all those hours, those meetings, all that effort that went back and forth, and then what do we get? We get virtually nothing, and where could that be better spent?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Beyond Labels. I'm Dr. Sina McCullough, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Joel Salatin. Hi, Joel. How you doing?
Hi, Sina. I'm doing great. Thanks.
So this episode, I wanted to talk about a labeling loophole in the beef industry. So I actually didn't know this loophole existed until recently. I got a newsletter from Center for Food Safety, and they were talking about this new bill, the American Beef Labeling Act of 2021. They're saying we need more sponsors in the Senate to try to move this bill through. And what they said is that the USDA currently allows meat companies to quote unquote mislabel beef produced in other countries. They can label it as product of the USA as long as the beef was re-wrapped in the USA. So what they're saying is cows can be raised in other countries, they can be slaughtered in other countries, then shipped over here to the United States. And as long as the meat is unwrapped and rewrapped in the United States, that beef can be labeled product of the USA. So this was shocking to me. So I sent it to you and I was like, is this actually true? And what was your response?
So several years ago, there was a pretty big effort in the kind of, integrity food movement to establish what's called country of origin labeling. It goes by the acronym COOL, COOL, country of origin labeling. And it was to try to get a handle on where meat came from, in the grocery store. It was a consumer advocacy thing. And as you and I have seen the average person could not invent more whatever silliness, within the labeling community. And so what they did in the COOL law was that they didn't actually require that they just said that it had to be in the US on its final labeling, its final wrap. So what people don't realize is nobody sends T-bone steaks to the US. Nobody sends whatever, pork chops. Nobody sends, well, that's pork, that's not beef, but anyway, nobody sends ribeye steaks to the US. What they send are what are called primals. So you have this carcass hanging here, and you can cut it in quarters, and then you kind of cut it in eighths. You cut those quarters again, and you essentially have 8 great big pieces. They're called primals. And that's what they send to the US. Nobody's sending little packages of retail cuts. They send these big primals. So they send those to the US. Then here they're of course unboxed, and then they cut them, they fabricate them into, ribeyes and T-bones and short ribs and whatever else. And so what the loophole, or the thing that this labeling law allowed, was that as long as that final wrap, that final fabrication and wrap was done in the US, the product could be labeled product of the US, which is of course completely misleading. It could come from Uruguay, Paraguay, Australia, New Zealand, wherever, the actual product, but be finally fabricated and wrapped here, and then it was labeled as here. So this is an effort to correct that. I just you and I have lost faith in the USDA to be able to do anything that's actually honest. But anyway, but that's the origins of this effort. That's why this has happened. So right now in the store, you can go and buy beef that's labeled product of the USA, and it may very well have come from Australia or Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, any place else, and just been finally packaged here in the US. How does that make you feel as a buyer?
Well, fortunately, as a buyer, it doesn't threaten me because I buy from my local farmer. But if I was buying from the grocery store still, this would be very alarming to me. And if I hadn't already lost faith in the labeling system, like if this was the first labeling debacle I had heard about, it would jolt me enough that I would start looking into, wait a minute, what else is on these labels that I really don't understand, right? Because as you and I know, these labels sometimes seem straightforward, but they never are, right? They almost never are. We'll put a little caveat in there. They almost never are straightforward.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I just couldn't believe this.
And you would, and you would, I think, you say you feel shocked. I'd like to push you a little bit and say, I feel betrayed. I mean, the average person would feel not just shocked, but betrayed. You feel betrayed by
Deceived.
The people who are supposed to be, supposedly looking out for your interest. And so what you feel is betrayed.
Yeah, I would feel very deceived. Like they were trying to trick me. Right. Trick me to buy something that was a facade, really. And so when you emailed me back and confirmed that this was true, I emailed you back and I said, all right, I have to dig into this. I got to find where this act is. Where did this whole thing start? Right. Because what they're saying is that Congress is now trying to pass that American Beef Labeling Act to amend the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946. So I went back, I read the current bill, and then I went back to that Marketing Act of 1946, and I was trying to piece together the history of it. And so this is something that I wanted to talk with you today, because this tells you, as though you and I haven't already peeled back the layers of deception of labels, right? We've already shown you the complexity of it. Right. This adds in a whole nother level of complexity, in my opinion, and a whole nother, it brings you to a new awareness that even the United States government doesn't have control over our food supply all the time. All right. So this is what I found. So for many years, agricultural commodities have actually been exempted from these cool requirements, right? Ever since the Tariff Act of 1930, these agricultural products were exempted until the 2002 Farm Bill. That Farm Bill amended, again, the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1946, and it did require the labeling. It required the labeling for beef and lamb and pork, and fish and shellfish, peanuts, fruits, vegetables. So it actually did require labeling for beef. But then what happened was in 2016, there was an appropriations bill that modified which products were going to be covered so that these cool laws no longer applied to beef and pork. And that appropriation bill was signed by President Obama. So, although, and I don't mean that, I'm saying that as a historical, fact, right. But obviously this has been a bipartisan effort. Okay. I'm not singling out either side. So it actually beef was included, but then, as I said, in 2016, it got taken out. So now the most recent regulation applies the cool laws only to lamb, chicken, goat meat, perishable agricultural commodities, macadamia nuts, pecans, peanuts, and ginseng. So other meats, right? Lamb, chicken, and goat meat are still required to have country of origin labeling, unless they're in a processed food. Actually, that's a caveat, but they're still required to have this country of origin labeling on the meat product. But somehow beef and pork got taken out. So I thought, well, that's weird. And at first I thought, oh, this just screams of lobbyists, but then this is what I found out. So once it was passed that there was going to be this labeling requirement, we as a country faced legal challenges from the World Trade Organization because of Mexico and Canada. So Mexico and Canada, who send a lot of beef to us, they threatened to impose over $1 billion of tariffs against the United States unless the labeling was removed. And that's why, as a result of the pressure, President Obama signed the appropriation bills removing the requirement. Now, what I found just kind of fascinating here, and a little bit like I lost even more faith in our food supply, is that went back and forth. So between the United States and Canada and Mexico, them threatening this tariffs against us, and then bringing a lawsuit through the World Trade Organization, that went back and forth for many years. And we kept losing and we kept appealing. And finally, in October 2014, the World Trade Organization Compliance Panel ruled that Canada and Mexico were successful in arguing that our rules presented a technical barrier to trade because of the increased production, segregation, and record-keeping requirements. And in December of 2015, Canada and Mexico were actually given approval by the World Trade Organization to move forward with their $1 billion worth of retaliatory tariffs against us. And so that's when Congress passed that 2016 Consolidation Appropriation Act that Obama signed, and it repealed the cool requirements for the beef and pork. On the heels of that, the USDA secretary at the time was Vilsack, and he sent out guidance that the USDA will no longer enforce the cool regulations for beef and pork in accordance with the new laws. So that meant the retailers, when you go onto the grocery store, they no longer had to label the country of origin. But again, they're still in effect for the chicken, lamb, and the goats. So this was specifically for the beef and the pork. So to me, I read this and I thought, so not only is this another layer of complexity of our food supply, but this shows you that not even our own government, even when they are well-intentioned, right? Even when they want to impose these labeling requirements for country of origin, they can be overridden by the interests of other countries. And in this case, that we had to bow down to the authority of the World Trade Organization. So you know what I'm saying? It reveals another layer of complexity, another layer of we really don't have control over our food supply in some areas. And when you want to change your food supply, right, like you and I really promote a free market solution, so we can talk about that too. But when a lot of people who still have faith in the government regulation of the food supply, when they want a change in the food supply, what do? Right, just like the Center for Food Safety is doing now, right? They're trying to go through Congress to pass another act, right? But as we're seeing here, once again, I think you would agree with me, that's not a good solution for us, because what's going to happen this time if they pass it? Are we going to be brought to the World Trade Organization again and sued and get into a tariff war? I mean, and this is why, in our podcast about the GMO labeling live that we just did, this is why I called these labeling wars, because these are constant battles that go on. And now this battle is not just between the consumers, the government, and the food industry. It's bringing in other countries. So you may think that you can go through and you might win a little battle, like, oh yay, we got that GMO labeling law passed, right? Score for us. And then as we revealed what's really in that regulation, right? That's not helping you. That's contributing to the deception that you see on these labels. So for me, this is one more reason why we should not be putting our faith in the system. We need to become our own solution.
So, Sina, yeah, thanks for that good historical rundown on it. and obviously it shows that even if this effort passed, who knows what opposition it'll face at the WTO or other outfits. It's a tangled web, that's for
That's
sure.
right.
And so what that brings up, no, I mean, as a very practical matter, then when I see these kinds of big efforts, and and I get the emails, I get the letters, the send us a contribution, we're on this campaign, blah blah blah. And and what this kind of does is always bring me to a point where, okay, you and I only have so many hours in a day. We've got so much time to to devote to something, to a cause, to whatever it is that we want to devote our time to. And it begs the question, well, where's the biggest return for effort? And I mean, you have to ask that question. We ask it in finance, we ask it in investment. You have to ask it in time as well. I've only got so much time in the day. I've got to get the kids to soccer practice. I've got to go to the elders meeting at church. I've got to, and we've only got so much time to invest, as well as just so much money to invest. And so you ask for, for bang, we say bang for the buck. Well, bang for the hour. All right. And so, I would just lay it on the table and, enjoy your response, that these kinds of things make me want to say, if all the effort that has gone into this certainly sincere, heartfelt, sincere campaign, if all that effort were channeled somewhere else in facilitating direct farm to plate marketing, facilitating abattoirs so farmers could get to get slots for their animals, to be able to get them processed, or whatever. The point is that there are other competitive options for placing this level of time and attention in the food system. And I always come away from this thinking, boy, all those hours, those meetings, all that effort that went back and forth, and then what do we get? We get virtually nothing. And where could that be better spent?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would go as far as to say, not only do we get virtually nothing, we get more deception. So, right, the web gets even more tangled. And so I agree with you. And that's one thing I recognized early on, is that these, we're activists in each of us in our own way. We're trying to defend our food supply in whatever way resonates with us. And as I had untangled what's happening like years ago, I realized that the system wasn't going to change. That because where you put your effort and your energy, it grows. So if I'm putting my effort and my energy into bills, I'm helping to grow that tangled web, because there's no bill that's going to come out they're not going to find loopholes for it, or exemptions, or another country's not going to, sue us over it. No bill is this.
Right.
Yeah. So what I decided early on was I was not going to play the game, right? I wasn't going to support that system. I wasn't going to engage in those battles, because you're never going to win the war if you engage the battles in that strategy, in my opinion. And so I decided that I would fight the battles with my dollars, right? That's what companies are about, is the bottom dollar, right? That's not what they're all about, obviously, but the dollar does matter to the company. They do respond when you stop buying the products, and they do notice when there's a shift and you start buying, the organic version of the product, And so I decided early on, my effort was going to be to move the market. Also, because number one, it's not helping to contribute to the system of deception and continued loopholes that's fallible and susceptible to influence by lobbyists and other countries and people who don't have the consumer's interest in heart. But it also is empowering, because you don't have to go through government to change the market, right? you can go straight to the food producer, you can go straight to the farmer, and you can actually have a bigger impact. So what I decided to do was, let's put out that positive message that we don't have to keep fighting these battles. We can focus on the positive. We can make the change ourselves. And we can do that by moving the market. And you do that by speaking with your dollars. So every bite of food that goes into my body and my family's body, it's an intentional choice, right? And then we tried to educate people and make it easy for them. Like we did that podcast on how to find an authentic food supply. That's why we did that, was to help people realize there is a better way. You can get authentic, clean food that's not going to hurt you, and that you can trust the label. And this is how you can do it. So we try to create a path of least resistance to help them access that food while supporting these companies that we believe in. And in that way, we focus on the positive, right? Put our energy in that direction, and then it will grow that system.
Right. You know, we live in a time of surrogates. You know, we've never been able medically to have, you know, surrogate parenting, you know, where you implant an embryo in somebody else's womb, and you pay them to, have the pregnancy for you. That's perhaps a very extreme example of surrogate, but the idea of surrogate, I think, can be used. You know, it's like we want to have surrogate decision makers. You know, I don't want to mess with it. I don't want to fool with it. So I want you to pass a bill so that that's out of sight, out of mind. And we have created this whole surrogate mentality for decision, for protection, for making sure that what we want to happen will happen. And as we have seen over and over, you can't just give your health, your food decision making, you can't give it over to a surrogate. Nobody is going to watch out for your interests like you will. And I mean, we've done it with we've done it in education. You know, let's have surrogate education. Well, we see where that's heading in many places. I don't want to get in too many broad topics here, but the push in our culture right now toward, I'm a victim, or I'm entitled, I'm not responsible. I think it has its kind of foundation in this surrogate idea that I can go over here and I can, feed on junk food and Netflix, and the experts will, take care, make all these decisions for me while I, play my video games and eat chocolate bonbons and watch Netflix. And so we've surrogated, I don't know if that's the word or not, but we've created this kind of a surrogate decision making expert model, if not physically, at least kind of mentally and figuratively, in our heads. And so I think what we're finding is that you simply can't do that and get where you want to be. You can't do that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the more that I've learned on my journey, the more I realized it is outsourcing your authority, right? And when you do that, you weaken your intuition as well, because you're trusting others as these supposed experts over yourself. And so, intuition is like a muscle that you exercise. And so I've realized that my intuition has strengthened the more and more I put my faith in myself, and the more and more I question authoritative figures, these supposed experts. Now, I will say that when you stop and think about it and you look around, it can be overwhelming when you start thinking of all these different areas where you have outsourced your authority, right? And we've all done this to some extent, okay? So it can be really overwhelming. And so what I always say to people, start with one thing, right? And don't even try to tackle your whole food supply at one point. If you're watching this video and this is alarming to you, and you want to know where your beef is coming from, then make that change. Find your local farmer, or like we said in a previous episode, you can actually order, good beef online now. It can be delivered to your doorstep. So there's easy solutions for finding an authentic beef supply. So just start with that one step. Don't start with the whole field and be like, oh, I have to do all these things and take all my authority back right now. Do one step, and then when you're ready, do the next step. And before you know it, if you keep doing that, even if you made like one change every 2 weeks, you're going to be so much stronger, like mentally and physically and emotionally, and so much more in tune with your intuition by the end of a year. That's just by making small changes incrementally. So don't be overwhelmed with it. Do one step at a time. And this would be a good first step,
Yeah. Well, if you start with your animal protein, that's one of the that's one of the biggest parts of the consumer dollar. And so if you start there, that's a good place to start. Well, this has been fascinating, Sina. I really appreciate you staying on top of this, bringing it up. And it's the kind of thing where I admit I just gave up on it. And a lot of that, all that bills and lobbying, and people say, I mean, media. I get, over the years, they've always asked me, what do you think about the farm bill? I say, I haven't even read it. I don't care about the farm bill. I'm not even in the farm bill. Who cares? But it's amazing how much effort goes into these things. And I know they have implications, but at the same time, if all the people who got their pants in a wad about these efforts would would actually just get very practical, find their alternative source, vote with their food dollar, put all that effort right in there, exercise their intuition, become skilled at vetting your provenance. That's a skill too. And if that became where we became expert, we could just not get all riled up with some of these efforts that occupy our time. So thanks, Sina, for bringing this to our attention. And we'll thanks everybody for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next time.